also like to welcome all of the webinar participants today and hope you enjoy my and Tim's presentations. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we are meeting from and pay our respects to those elders past and present. The Timber Framing Collective meets to discuss collaborative marketing for the timber industry. All Timber Framing Collective meetings are conducted consistent with the requirements of the Competition and Consumer Act and strictly preclude discussion of any competitively sensitive information or any anti-competitive practices that may relate to the misuse of market power. I'm here today to represent the Timber Framing Collective founding partners. The companies we are employed by are members of the Australian Forest Products Association, Softwood Manufacturers Chamber, and this group, whose photos you'll see on this slide, are the marketing committee for that chamber. We have been working collaboratively promoting the benefits of timber framing since early 2019. Today's presentation will focus on 4 key areas. I'll play a video first up and then talk to you about the many benefits of timber framing. I'll cover the Timber Framing Collective's journey so far, the new website, and the tools available for use. The current market. I'll talk about the housing starts in Australia and touch on imports. And lastly, I'll cover what's coming over the next 12 months for the Timber Framing Collective and how you can be involved.
To build a home is to build a future. Somewhere safe and secure for families to grow, where we can find our place in the world and look forward to all the good times ahead. But if we're to dream of a brighter future, we must take care of the home we all share by using materials that don't pollute our skies, litter our oceans, or accelerate climate change. It's time to work with nature, to embrace the natural wonders of wood. Timber is fast and efficient to build with, and with the right treatment, some builds can last for hundreds of years. Organic and non-toxic, it's a natural insulator that can help reduce household energy use. Best of all, timber framing is the eco-friendly choice. And while buildings account for almost 1/4 of total greenhouse emissions in Australia, the timber in framing is actually carbon positive, which means the production process removes more carbon dioxide than it emits. That's because we harvest trees that have been left to grow for around 30 years, absorbing huge amounts of carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. In fact, around half the dry weight of wood is carbon, which means a typical Australian home stores almost 3 tons of carbon in its timber framing. Carbon that stays locked up, even if the timber is eventually reused. As timber quite literally grows on trees, it's renewable and natural. The more timber framing we use, the more sustainable forests we plant, preserving our home and protecting the air we breathe. For every tree that's harvested, at least one more is planted in its place. A new cycle of life, a new forest to create a brighter future for the next generation. Let's build a better world. Let's build with timber framing.
We all know that timber framing has been trusted by Australian builders for centuries. So let's unpack why this is the case from what's mentioned in the video. The first key message: timber is one of the most eco-friendly materials on Earth. It's safe and trusted, and it's the only framing material that tackles irreversible climate change. And research shows that this is exactly what Australians are looking for. It's a natural insulator that can help reduce household energy use. Tiny air pockets in timber framing add resistance to heat flow throughout a home. And with good design, timber frame buildings can better regulate their internal temperature and reduce household energy use when it comes to heating and cooling. Trees are harvested when they are around 30 years old, and at least one is replanted in its place. Cutting down trees is often perceived as a bad thing. However, the timber framing in your home comes from sustainably certified forests. In Australia, over 70 million trees are replanted each year, and our softwood plantations grow the volume of timber framing needed to build the average home in 2.5 minutes. Sustainable forests absorb huge amounts of carbon dioxide. When you build with timber framing, your home removes more than 8 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is equivalent to taking 4 cars off the road in a year. If you are a builder who builds 50 houses each year, 446 tons of carbon are sequestered from the atmosphere. And what's more, the carbon is kept safely locked up and out of the air we breathe for as long as the home exists, even if the timber is eventually reused. Did you know that timber has the lowest embodied energy of all mainstream building materials? This means that the entire production process of timber framing, from planting and harvesting to manufacturing, transportation, and installation, uses the least amount of energy, and new technologies and innovations are increasing yields from each log, decreasing waste and reducing energy use further. Timber framing helps Australia grow and prosper, from forestry and sawmill workers to treatment suppliers, nail plate and truss manufacturers, distributors, carpenters and tradies. The industry provides over 45,000 local jobs and contributes 24 billion to the Australian economy each year. We have such a great story to tell. Now, those are just a few reasons why timber framing is used in around 80% of Australian homes. And as one of the oldest resources, it's also the building material we're most experienced with. The Marketing Committee saw an opportunity to share these benefits with builders and homeowners through partnering with industry stakeholders, many who have supported our committee over the years in kind and with funding. We wanted to share the contribution our industry is making to help tackle climate change, empower and equip builders and suppliers to share information about environmentally friendly building materials with homeowners. We could see that our messaging was powerful if we created a united front by working closely together with our stakeholders. For the benefit of the timber industry, we could reach a broader audience. The Forest and Wood Products Australia's mass media campaign, Wood, the Ultimate Renewable, with Adam Dovell as the new brand ambassador, was launched in June 2022. It was broader than timber framing alone. Its aim was to reinforce public awareness of the sustainable nature of wood and all wood products. It sparked a conversation. The Timber Framing Collective launched Timber Framing, the Ultimate Renewable shortly after. And we were able to leverage off the success of Wood, the Ultimate Renewable campaign. By extension, Timber Framing, the Ultimate Renewable offered an emotional appeal that unites an industry and speaks to future homeowners with the tagline, "Let's build a better world," and is the collective voice for timber framing. The language is inclusive, collaborative, and supportive, focusing on families enjoying their eco-friendly homes and connecting with each other and nature. We developed a new website for the campaign with brand tools and a suite of resources to empower users to promote the many benefits of timber framing and to complement our stakeholders' own marketing and communications. There are several videos, posters and brochures, fact sheets and certificates of installation, email banners, and social media content. The great thing about all of this is that these tools can be co-branded. The campaign targeted a number of activities across Australia. to reach a broad section of builders and consumers alike to create awareness. We were at the Bunnings Expos in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth last year. Adam Doval was our guest at the Sydney and Melbourne Expos, helping reinforce the benefits of using timber framing in homes. We sponsored one of the Master Builders Awards nights in the Hunter Valley in November last year, where our collateral was included in the welcome packs and our branding appeared on all of the night's trophies. How good do those trophies look? Our Ads on Wheels campaign in Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Sunshine Coast and Caboolture over August and September last year further promoted our brand and gathered interest. Founding and funding partners have also been cascading messaging to their networks via printed stories and advertising in strategic publications. You may have seen some of them. And we've also used social media content via our LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook pages, as well as the website brand tools. We've also sent out personalised direct mailer videos to the top 100 builders and had dozens of follow-up conversations with them. The video that plays on the direct mailer reinforces the benefits of timber framing and showcases our website. Our research shows that consumers are interested in what's behind the walls of their homes. They'd like their builders to provide materials that are good for the environment, and they rate green credentials as an important part of the building process. Campaign interest is growing, and our website is attracting more visitors each month. We've had some success with builders at different levels across the country. We want to work with them to share the messaging and incorporate this into their own marketing to prospective homeowners. We know that if we can recruit builders, we will reach homeowners. Local producers have been investing heavily over recent years, and this was especially so during COVID, where production facilities were at capacity and demand was outstripping supply. Fabricators, transport providers, and many others in the supply chain have also been investing to improve their quality offering. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a building boom. The lockdowns in Victoria had us working from home, and that created the perfect opportunity to get all of those home renovations completed. Inevitably, this boom had to slow at some point. And in the past 6 months, the market has been rebasing. This slide shows the total national housing starts forecast from 2009 to 2010 financial year, right through to 2024-2025 financial year. The black bars show actuals, and the yellow bars show what is forecast by Housing Industry Association. There's been a significant softening in the 2022-2023 financial year, and it is expected to lift slightly in the 2024-2025 financial year. The many interest rate increases since the election last year have impacted customer confidence, and this has been further rocked by a few of the larger builders going into administration over recent months. If we take a deeper dive by state, in Victoria, new housing starts have come off a high during COVID and are expected to fall over the next 2 years to a 10-year low in the 2025 financial year. Although New South Wales is expecting to decline in the 2022-2023 financial year, the forecast is for incremental increases in the next 2 financial years. South Australia has had peaks and troughs historically, but the quantum between the highs and the lows is small in comparison to the others. to the other states. Apart from the marked increase in the last 2 financial years, South Australia is expected to flatten out in the next 2 years to pre-COVID levels. Queensland, like New South Wales, is on an upward trend and is forecast to increase in housing starts year on year to the end of the 2025 financial year. If we were to look at import volumes to get a complete picture of the domestic housing market, the story is very similar to the housing starts forecast by Housing Industry Association in the previous slides. This slide shows the total sawn softwood imports by state, starting from January 2021 to the end of March 2023. The trend line rises steadily over 15 months from January 2021 to March 2022, where it reaches its peak. And then for the last 12 months, the trend line is on a steady decline to March 2023, falling to similar levels as the start of the graph in January 2021. At a state level, sawn softwood imports continue to alter as total volumes change dramatically. This slide shows the total imported volumes for each state in the years ending April 2022 and April 2023. You'll see that New South Wales, Queensland, and Victoria import volumes are consistent with the trend in the previous slide and have fallen. But South Australia, Tasmania, and Western Australia have bucked the trend, and their volumes have increased. Western Australia's volumes have more than tripled in 12 months. Imports overall decreased by 9% in the 12 months reported. So where is the imported product coming from? This slide shows the total imported products, country of origin, over 3 consecutive years, April 2021 through to April 2023. Lithuania and New Zealand have lifted their contribution over the past year to the Australian market. Lithuania is up almost 36% and New Zealand almost 9% for the year ended April 2023. However, other major supplier countries to see steep import declines were Germany at just over 14%, Estonia down by 22.5%, and Sweden fell by over 50%. This further reinforces the softening of the Australian market. But look, it's not all doom and gloom. On a positive note, immigration is forecast to increase and demand for housing is outstripping supply. Peaks and troughs occur, and those who have been in the industry for any length of time will appreciate the cycles we go through. Our industry remains strong. The Australian government continues to invest in the timber industry. So what's next? We're primed and ready, so when the market turns, we can and will respond quickly. How can you get involved? Well, we want homeowners and builders to choose timber framing first for their homes. I've shared some really compelling reasons why they should with you all today. So visit the Timber Framing Collective's website, check out the resources page and download the brand tools. We've got great statistics and a great website with tools that will make you look good when you use them on your own marketing. If you don't have a marketing team and are unsure how to use the tools, get in touch with one of the Timber Framing Collective's founding partners by sending us an email on the contact page of the website, which is shown on this slide. Think about your own customers and how the information I've presented today can relate to them. I'm nearly done, but want to share a video of the campaign's performance so far.
In a world that desperately needs to cut emissions, it was time to bring people back to sustainable resources, to put timber back in the frame. We partnered with the timber framing industry, with founding funding partners and supporters, and people across the entire supply chain to put timber framing at the core of the conversation and encourage people building new homes across Australia to choose the most eco-friendly framing material available. It wasn't simply creating ads and buying audiences. Through interviews, workshops, and market research, we discovered that the industry needed to be unified to create confidence around supply and to tell timber framing's sustainable story to an audience that still saw cutting down trees as a bad thing. But without the funds of our competitors, we needed to leverage one of the industry's greatest strengths, turning the tens of thousands of people in the supply chain into passionate advocates of timber framing. First, we transformed the internal marketing committee with a B2B platform that could take leadership on all things timber framing. We created its brand identity and website and launched it insightfully into the industry network. With this newfound collective voice, we shifted the timber framing supply issue to a demand issue with a campaign that reassured the industry of the strong future of timber framing. While supply was growing back into balance, we transformed the existing category brand into a highly desirable asset. And we didn't stop there. We developed an entire suite of creative resources designed to not only give consumers the reason to choose timber framing, but to empower and equip the industry with tools to share timber framing's incredible story. Our final step was to inspire an entire industry to adopt the creative resources as their own and proudly share them across their networks. Through emotive, pointed messaging and strategic touchpoints, we launched the brand tools into the hands of the industry. Since the launch, over 760 people have accessed the creative resources. There's been a 27% increase in builders who value green credentials as one of the most important factors in their choice of materials. Additionally, there's been a 21% increase in builders who feel positively about timber framing's environmental impact. An 11% decrease in consumers who rate steel as superior. And the industry's list of supporters has risen by an incredible 52%. These numbers continue to grow as more passionate people join the movement, ready to promote the resource that locks up carbon and preserves the home we all share. Let's build a better world.
Thanks everyone for your time today. I'm now going to hand over to Tim for his presentation.
Thanks, Tanya. That was a spectacular intro. That's a lot to follow. As one of the converts, fully behind the Timber Collective and what it can do. What I'm here to talk to you about today is to bring you up to date really with the improvements and changes in prefabrication as it applies to timber in the industry. The reality is getting timber into buildings is a best practice, and the way that we can do it improves year on year on year. Let's start by considering the term design, one of my least favorite terms because it's used by many people in many different ways. If someone says you haven't designed the house properly, it depends on whether you are the architect or the builder as to whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. The engineer can design the structural concepts, the architect can design the shape, but design is not very well defined. When we think about design, I want to consider how the building is put together, what shape it is, what environments it has to sit within, and then encapsulate all of that into doing it efficiently. So considering all of those components is something that you can do much better prior to construction than you can do during construction. Hence leading towards prefabrication or offsite construction, where you can make a lot of digital decisions around the design complexities before you even lay saw to timber. So how does that actually work? Where are we up to in the industry? Today, I want to go through some of the benefits of prefabrication and then its evolution to where we stand today. The timber industry touches all parts of the supply chain. Whether you're an architect choosing a material, an engineer designing a beam, a builder on site standing your frames and trusses, a fabricator who manufactures prefabricated components, a carpenter, a tradie, etc., etc. The whole supply chain is part of the decision-making process in that they take the results of those decisions. So they are the ones that consume the products that have been created. They're the ones that then have to accommodate whatever decisions were made in those creation, each step down the process relying on the previous one. So if we get into the middle of that conversation as timber framing providers, we can ensure that all the decisions that are made along the way, hopefully will then produce the most efficient outcome. So what are the efficiency drivers for offsite? How does offsite improve your circumstance on a day-to-day basis? Let's start with the negatives for being on site. Sorry, I've got an auto forward on my slide set that I really don't like. If you're on site, the costs that you are going to incur have some unknowns: weather, trade skills, currently in Australia, trade availability, how long will the process take, and how much waste is generated, then where does it go? Many of those factors are basically unknowns in the industry today because the weather is unpredictable, trades are quite difficult to source. So that's what you're going to need to accommodate on site. What can you get by producing things off site? Well, firstly, you're in a factory controlled environment, so weather is not going to be a factor. The stress and strain on your workers is much less of a factor because they're in factory conditions. Generally, they're handling smaller components to make larger components, and they're mechanically aided to move those larger components around. The skill sets stay within the factory. You have a consistent set of staff that grow in experience and ability over time. You are not affected by weather changes. So it can be pouring down rain outside or freezing cold, and the factory can still operate and continue. In fact, in Europe, prefabrication has taken such a strong hold because of the environmental considerations of not being able to get on site for so many months of the year. Getting your product to site and installed, definitely a positive in a marketplace which snows for 6 or 7 months of the year. So where are we today? Where's prefabrication up to in today's Australian market? And where can it get to? That's what I want to talk about today. We get prefabricated roof trusses, wall frames, and floor systems. All of these are replacements for your standard on-site builds where a pack of timber arrives on site, a carpenter turns up with a sawhorse, and a tape measure, and away they go. The equipment that we've produced these frames and trusses on has evolved over decades, just as the computer and the phone systems have. We've gone from very manual benchtop saw operations to highly automated equipment, very highly software dependent as the sophistication grows. Here's an example of the evolution over time, where you'll see at the top left-hand corner, our beginnings were manually pulled saws. They were originally with tape measures, manual angulation settings, all following outputs from computer systems that instructed the user where to put the wood, what size to put the wood, what angle to cut it at, and what length. That's then evolved over time through computer-generated length stops, where the length of the wood to be cut and computer angulation of the saws made sure that each piece of timber that was being cut was cut accurately and precisely. In the high production environments of consistent truss shapes, there was a market for a type of saw where at one end you'll see that Cyber AT, you'll see, if you look closely, 3 saw blades at that end, and at the back of the photo there's another 3 saw blades. That whole system would move in and out to change length, and the saw blades would rotate in angle to change the angle of the cut. And then the chain drive would simply drag the timber through the saw blades to create each of them at the right length and the right angles. That's a spectacularly efficient way of manufacturing if you have exactly the same truss multiple times. As the industry realized that customization of homes was much more likely, those saws have now morphed into inline saw systems, where the timber is presented to the saw by automatically fed length creation, and a saw blade internally that rotates to the right angle and the right place. Couple that innovation of technology with software that determines what piece of timber goes into what element of the building and combines that with other pieces of timber from other parts of the building. And the waste reduction of these inline saw systems is phenomenal. Previously, a saw like the first one or the Cyber multi-cut saw would produce a tub of waste at the end of every day that would need to be dealt with and then reprocessed, etc., to get reuse, or in worst cases, put out the back for the firewood collection. In the instance of the inline saws, it's quite possible to get negative waste, where if I have a single piece of timber with an angle cut for the end of a truss that happens to be the same angle cut for the start of the next truss, then I can make one cut, turn the timber over and use it in the second application. So the system today is that the saws are handed a list of components required for a roof set, and then they reconcile that list to try and reduce the amount of waste available. And the first stick of timber that may go through that saw might cut you element A from the first truss, element Q from the 15th truss, and element Z or Z1 from the 25th truss, all out of the first stick of timber. And the waste at the other end, sawdust. In the event that you can't quite get the right length, then there's another option that's applied, which uses small blocks of timber, which go into the wall frame production, which are a standard 200 millimeters long, or trimmers that go into ceiling systems that are 565 or 865, depending on your market. And they also get stacked off to the side and used in the construction. Net result, the amount of waste coming out of a timber frame and truss operation now is greatly reduced and often ends up going back to particle board manufacturers to go into flooring. So from saws, we go to how do we assemble the trusses? The nail plate was invented back in the 50s. It was a revolution at the time. It was a way of connecting elements of timber together in a very efficient manner. It's merely a multi-tooth piece of steel that is hydraulically pressed into the timber. So the actual process is to align all the members into their right order, their right orientation, apply the right nail plate, and then press home. As an engineer, one of the things that I continue to remind people is they're not to be put in by a hammer. They get put in by hydraulic presses or roller presses such that they are embedded evenly and neatly so that the design requirements that we have as engineers are being fulfilled by the nail plate in situ. So in the beginnings, suspended C-clamps, hydraulic presses that were manually moved around the truss and then embedded the nail plates was the norm. Some of the systems had unistrut supports with pucks on them that held the timber in the right position. And the C-clamps may have been suspended from the ceiling or from a gantry as shown in the photo, or they may have even been on a small trolley of their own that was pushed around a factory floor and then pushed into position before pressing. That then morphed into platen presses. You'll see the next slide, and eventually into roller presses, which is the middle down the bottom, where a large beam goes across the truss and either presses down flat in the case of a platen press, or a roller passes across the truss and embeds the nail plates. In the high production common truss elements of the 80s and the very early 90s, common trusses of exactly the same shape and size, which were great for those multi-bladed saws, were also very good for a multi-fed plate system. So those little jigs down the bottom have stacks of nail plates inserted in them. They automatically press those plates in when operated by the operator. Again, times have moved on. Consistent trusses are less the norm. Customized homes, variable roof shapes. We need to create trusses of a variety of shapes to go into the same roof. Enter table presses with automatic pucking systems that locate the shape of the truss that the assembler puts into the position. Note on the left-hand side, there are laser systems that give guidance as to where the truss should be, where the nail plate should go, the orientation of the plates, etc. Again, increasing efficiencies for production while creating the most efficient structural element for a house. Moving forward to the upper end of market today, systems that take in-fed trusses into a automated plate pressing environment where a image of the nail plate is compared to the design. Sorry, the image of the joint is compared to the design. The nail plate is selected automatically. It is robotically positioned over the top of the joint, oriented to its exact position, and then pressed home. Once that truss is let go from the left-hand side, it moves through that pressing station automatically until it comes out on the right-hand side and is then stacked for use. So where are we at in the marketplace? Depending on where you live, you might think roof trusses are pretty common. That's just the norm in the environment. Well, Australia is a very large country with quite a variety of usage. And depending on where you particularly come from, might mean that it's common or rare. So I thought it was worthwhile just exploring where roof trusses and wall frames, etc., are in the marketplace. So here is a quick snapshot of the roof truss manufacturers around Australia. And you might gather from that, depending on where you live, how common roof trusses might be. You'll note that around the highly populated areas of the south east of Australia, lots and lots of roof truss production, not so much in Western Australia, and even less as the further north you go. That's just the reality of how the market has evolved. There's no real environmental difference that drove trusses on the East Coast versus the West Coast. It's purely the way that the market has evolved over time. So depending on where you live, you may see roof trusses every day, or you may not see them at all. How about wall frames? Wall frame production also has evolved over time from simply putting a table in a truss plant and nailing your wall frames together to be delivered on site one at a time, to fully automated systems which push the timbers through a set of nailing bridges, position the studs into position, and create a wall frame, to a highly automated multi-component assembly system, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, where elements are created offline and then reassembled together into the frame that's then stacked up and set out onto site. How common are wall frames? Again, it depends on where you live. In the far north of the country, you'll find solid blocks with concrete beams around them. In the cyclonic areas, you'll find steel framing on the northwest. You'll find full brick construction as you go around Perth. You'll find that as you hit into South Australia and Adelaide, lots of timber framing on site, very little prefabrication. And then on the southeast again, we're back to high concentrations of prefabricated wall frames. More so in southeast Queensland and New South Wales. Victoria is still a mixed bag of some prefabricated, some site constructed. All of these things create a need for software. So the truss and frame industry has pretty much paralleled the growth of the PC for a period of time. When we first started, little programmable calculators were used to create those cutting sheets that were then sent out to the factory, and the sawyer would measure with the tape how long the piece of timber was. He'd angulate the saw, cut the piece of timber, do that once, and again, and again, and again. And as time progressed, we had PCs start to come into the marketplace, floppy disk drives, etc. And then over time, we've ended up where we are today, where previously we had a little electronic card and a programmable calculator. Now we're getting fully blown building information models, or BIMs, created within truss plants that they design their frames and trusses from. Within a BIM, you can do not only structural design, but you can check for clash detection, the ability for the systems to ensure that what goes out on site will work is all dealt with in the truss plant before creation. And then all of that material goes out to the machinery, and the trusses are then made exactly as per plan. So where are we going to go in the future? We're going to head down the path of fully panelized, fully pre-constructed walls. That is where it has happened in the European market, and it's not unlikely that it will happen in this market as well. But we're already there in some places. So around the country, there are already businesses that create fully prefabricated panelized walls that are then taken to site for installation to a building. Now, this is one step behind fully modular, where you create a whole structure and take that to site. This is the step in between. And there's always a balance between how much air should one ship versus how much product you should ship. So a fully modular volumetric construction where you're shipping a whole house or a part house has a lot of transport cost involved, as opposed to the efficiency of simply lining and placing your windows and insulation in the walls and then sending those out to site. So that is available in the market today. Again, more collaboration is required, more design decisions are needed back at the beginning as part of the computerized system to make sure that what is sent out on site does fit, because there's much less modification available to you when you have a fully panelized wall turn up on site than if you had an open wall frame. We've had great success in the market with floor cassettes. In the beginning of floor cassette systems, where you take a series of joists and you place the flooring on and then set it to site as a cassette, the emphasis was around low set construction. So what did it look like when you had a site that had a slope and you tried to apply a concrete slab, which was a common methodology at the time? Could we do a better job by using floor cassettes? The answer is definitely, but the appetite for it wasn't as high as we'd liked. Generally, what's happened though is floor cassettes have become very popular for upper floors and multi-residential construction. Sites like these in Melbourne, where floor cassettes turn up on a truck, they're craned into position, and you end up with a floor system being created fairly rapidly on site, rather than someone up working at heights, placing trusses down one at a time or joists down one at a time, and then placing the flooring in position. Can we do roof cassettes? Yes, we can. And they happen today. Some video footage, some still footage here from the Verity site up in New South Wales, where they've prefabricated roof cassettes, taken those out to site and installed them. Also being done today in the market. Overseas, they've taken it to even further forms, where they're doing rafted cassettes for roof systems included with insulation and putting those on top of floor cassette systems, all readily insulated and rapid construction results. It's not all that new. A quick case study back in 2008, if you've ever been to Canberra to the National Portrait Gallery, that spectacular building there happens to be made up of a whole pile of roof cassettes that were fabricated in a truss plant only 20 or so kilometres down the road, taken out to site, installed. From a scale perspective, those trusses span roughly 13 metres from support to support, and with their wings, they're about 15 metres each. And there are 5 bays of those as you go from left to right across the page. And when you get the overview and see the scale of the structure, remembering that each of those bays is 15 metres wide, they're about 75 metres long. That was a lot of roof cassettes to put into position. Just out of interest, in these particular roofs, they place the roof material 1V at a time, and that was fabricated on site out of a roll former and then craned in one piece at a time over the top of the whole structure. And your final result, you'd have no real indication that that's a trussed roof, but that is a very large number of roof trusses across that structure. So in summary, as we move more off-site, we're going to need more collaboration. To get the on-site accuracy and efficiency delivered, we need to make sure that we have those decisions made right back at the beginning and the questions asked about what fits and what doesn't. We continue to evolve the off-site manufacturing sector. As the market demands it, we'll continue to deliver. It's a very interesting concept as to which one's the chicken and the egg. Is the market driving the industry, or is the industry driving the market? I think we work together. As innovators in the building industry want innovators in the prefabrication industry, they get together and they continue to evolve over time. And the other thing to remember in this forum is that where your normal is may be innovation to someone else's area, or it might be an opportunity for someone else to use that system in their area. I hope that gave you a bit of a rundown as to where we are in the prefabrication industry today. And I'll throw back to Alice there to ask any questions that might have arisen.
It was fantastic, both presentations, so thanks both of you. We might actually start just with one from Brad Rodolfi, who's asking about given the significant storage of carbon when a builder is using timber frame components in their builds, do we foresee government incentives providing financial benefits for these builders in the future, similar to the current credit schemes? I might say a couple of words on that and then hand over to our speakers. Look, definitely, we see that happening. There's a huge interest at the moment in embodied impacts of materials. It's very much flavour of the month. We're seeing a whole range of different non-industry groups and other industry groups get involved in this area, non-government type areas. So the Green Building Council, neighbours, even Basics in New South Wales is going to put out a materials measurement around the embodied impact coming up. So that's definitely a take up at the moment, but less so in the residential sector, more so in the commercial sector, but it's going to flow on. You can guarantee that in the future. In terms of a similarity to carbon credit schemes, if you're asking, Brad, is that similar to, you know, people growing plantations being recognised for the carbon stored financially? We need to be careful about that double counting. You can't sort of get the benefit at the forest and then the benefit in at the in the construction, but it sort of depends where that timber comes from. But personally, I think there's going to be a huge sort of take up of that carbon interest going forward. I don't know if Tim or Tanya you want to add to that, but it really is flavour of the month, the embodied impact of materials.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add, Alistair. You know, I guess getting to net zero 2050 is, you know, there's a big push around all of the environmental impacts. And certainly timber framing is, you know, streets ahead of others. So, you know, watch the space, I think.
I think while it's really taking off at the commercial side of things, so our office buildings and our bigger sort of, you know, class 2, 3, 5 type buildings, it'll take a little while to flow into the class 1 sector. But I think what's interesting at the moment is builders are reporting back that customers are very interested now where the products come from. And, you know, often it's they speak more about, how much are we going to get for our dollar? That these days with sort of energy efficiency coming in and the need to, you know, design for 7-star, that sort of that impact on the environment is very much on their radars. And I think that's how we'll see a sort of much bigger flow-on effect with people asking about the materials that's being supplied. Tim, we've got a question here from Michael Owen. You show floor cassettes. He says try sourcing them. Hopefully they're quite readily available now. We know they've been around for some time. He mentions his business construction methodology is 21st century and they use a lot of cranes, so that OH&S is taken into consideration, which is an important part of cassettes. He's asking how MyTech can help, but I think there's probably lots of the different frame and truss people that could supply floor cassettes now.
Yeah, and all of the fabricators or the nail plate providers and technology providers, MyTech, Multi-Line Provider, have customers who provide floor cassettes. So it's not everybody, but there's certainly a large number across the country. So get in contact with any of your local areas and we'll put you in touch with the right people.
It was an interesting point, Tim, you made about when we first developed up the floor cassette. It was actually for the ground floor residential market back at the time. And builders at that time who were converting away to concrete slab, we asked them, you know, why are you doing that, particularly on constrained sites like sloping sites or flood prone zones or reactive clays, where actually slab's probably not a good engineering option. There are better ways to do it. And they told us at the time we needed to offer what that sector offer, a working surface on a site on a specific date for a specific cost, one contract. And that's where we started to develop it for that ground floor market. But the takeoff has really been in that repetition areas like sort of apartments where you might have sort of, you know, 5, 10 of those in a row, or in the commercial sector. But I think, well, what's your thoughts on that about sort of developing up that ground floor market on particularly the sloping sites and the flood prone zones?
Efficiencies from repetition, that's the way it goes. So given you have repetition, then that's where you're going to get your efficiency. There's a challenge around the use of floor cassettes in some areas around walking up to the floor. There's been a whole bunch of stuff coming in the latest NCC around accessibility that talks about ramping to get up to structures. On a sloping site, doesn't really matter. You're going to have to step up or down to something anyway. It would be much better, I would think, to be using a floor cassette system. There's also some question marks to be answered depending on where you live around the use of thermal mass and whether the slab helps or hinders. So I'm not an energy efficiency expert, but I know that anecdotally there's some places that works well and there's other places that doesn't work well. I think the most important thing is remembering it's an option rather than just falling into the habit of, I did it last time, therefore I'll do it the next time, therefore I'll do it the next time. So remember it's there, inquire, and develop, as I said, the innovative builders will work in with the innovative fabricators.
And Tim, how do you see, the prefabrication sort of taking off in the rest of the world, like North America, Europe? What's that flow and effect to Australia?
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to follow much more labour availability than anything else. So the Americans are probably the laggards in this place. We think that the Americans are ahead of us in all things, but in prefabricated residential housing, not so. Much less prefabricated wall frames, even in the whole of Australia. They're pursuing now what they can do to do much more offsite construction, but that's generated mainly around the lack of labour. So between the Trump era and COVID, the amount of cheap labour that's available to be used on building sites has reduced dramatically. And so the interest in offsite construction and prefabrication has grown dramatically. In the European sector, similar labour shortages, but also, as I said during the presentation, it's around weather availability. So if you want a building to actually get going, then getting to site, getting it done and getting off again in the windows that you have available, highly important. So the cost of labour in Europe and the site availability has been the drivers. So Australia really follows in the same path. Our current skilled labour shortage will drive people much more towards off-site construction. And the weather doesn't seem to be the same effect depending on where you live. It's a lovely place to work outside today, but it may not be the next day.
Now, the labour one is a key one, hasn't it? And COVID's really sort of shown us that. I mean, I don't think it matters what industry you're in. People will tell you it's really hard to get staff at the moment. And similarly with the building sector, and we've seen, housing completion times blow out almost double just because it's been difficult to get trades in to finish the job off. So yeah, definitely from a prefabrication point of view, there's lots of benefits there in having your labour off-site and then sort of quick installation times. And as you say, we've seen that as a trend right around the world. I'd just pick up on a point Tanya made also just about imports. I think sort of in a normal year, Australia still relies on about 20% of its wood we consume coming from imports. So imports are quite important to us. And over COVID, when the markets were picking up in Europe and North America, the imports did dry up a bit at the same time that our demand increased by about 30% on the East Coast. So that's why everyone sort of experienced those shortages of product, which have all sort of balancing back now, as you showed in your statistics, Tanya, to sort of probably more normal levels as we understand them. And as we see that sort of cycle with the residential market again, where things might get a bit quiet, we've certainly seen a development of the new mid-rise market, and particularly there's opportunities in that sort of class 2 apartments, so 2, 3, 5, 6-story timber buildings instead of concrete, and been a lot of work done over that previously. And Tanya, in terms of the all the great sort of promotional tools that the Timber Framing Collective have produced, how do builders get access to those? I know you're encouraging builders to download these, use the logos, use the information. How would you encourage people to do that?
Sure. Look, the idea is to head to our website and contact us. One of the Timber Framing Collective founding partners will be in touch, and we can step people through it. It's one of the initiatives that we are embarking on this year, 2024 financial year, because we want to get close to builders. We want them obviously to use timber as their first choice when building house frames. So anything that we can do to help encourage homeowners and builders to do that, we're happy to do.
Fantastic. Well, we're just on midday. So Tim and Tanya, many thanks on behalf of all the attendees today for your presentation. It was fantastic. I just remind everyone that the webinars are recorded. So if you want to go back and look at this or let your colleagues know about it, just go to the WoodSolutions website. It'll be uploaded probably within the next couple of days. Just a reminder also that we do our regular WoodSolutions webinar on the first Tuesday of each month. So our next one will be on the 8th of August, which will be a really interesting webinar on the key lessons learnt on timber installation. And we've got Morocco from Managing Director of Belmedere coming to talk about that. So I encourage you to register for that one on the website. So thanks everyone for attending today. It's been great to have you on board. We look forward to seeing you again in the next webinar.